How do you do? The Box Office Pulp Board feels it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We're about to unfold a cinematic commentary track, made by a group of men who sought to create a podcast after their own ravings, without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with three great mysteries of the internet: analysis, observation, and deconstruction. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel you'd not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to... well, we've warned you. Now, to pause and refresh. For your convenience, we have an attractive refreshment stand in the lobby, with buttered popcorn, golden good and hot from the popper, your favorite candies, wholesome and rich, plus delicious Dr. Pepper, so bright and bracing with a tang and tingle unmatched by any other beverage. Enjoy an ice-cold Dr. Pepper at our beverage stand right now, and then return to fully appreciate this bop and a movie commentary track. Enjoy. Show me the way to go home. I'm tired and I want to go to bed. Had a little drink about an hour ago, and it went straight to my head. Neither sand nor sea nor foam. Shark breaks through the wall, eats me, puts me out of my misery, drags me out to the pond, and the frogs scour my bones.
Why are the frogs scouring your bones?
Because they're waiting. The boogans are just waiting for their time.
May the frogs scour thy bones. The Cody Health story.
Frogs are the mind killer.
All right.
Anyways, let's do this. We need to get on it.
And how did we decide we were going to start this thing, Cody, doing a...
I figured I was just going to do something pretty basic, like, hi, welcome to Box Office Pulp. We're trying something new here today. We're actually going to be doing a commentary. Instead of us just doing our normal dick jokes, now we'll have a movie in the background.
Bop and a movie.
Bop and a movie. Everyone can thank James. He's the smart one of the group. He came up with the title. And if you have something better, not that there's anything better than what James suggested, but between you and me, audience, if you have something better, go ahead and suggest it to us on our Facebook page. Totally.
I hear you.
Oh, God. Oh, no. Anyways, joining me tonight, your host, Cody, we have James.
Hey.
Hey. MB.
Farewell and adieu.
Opa. And Mike.
I was going to say Hooper.
Opa.
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 Opa?
Opa. Opa.
Opa.
And we'll be making that joke for the rest of our lives. Anyways, hopefully you don't get sick of hoopas, because you got plenty coming to you. Tonight's very first feature, we're going to be commenting on Jaws.
The 1975 classic.
Not that
Yes.
remake we're all sick of.
Not Jaws 2, not Jaws 3D, although that would be fun. Not Shark Night, not Bait, Jaws, the original.
Or the
And-
Turkish Jaws 5.
And not, I noticed you left it out, not The Revenge.
And
This
not
is
The
not The Revenge.
That's very true.
This is strictly the first strike. The Revenge has yet to come.
Arguably, though, this is still personal, but to us.
That's true. So without much more further ado, because technical difficulties had caused this to stretch into a 9-hour ordeal, MB has had to eat both of his legs just for subsistence. We're gonna... Are you guys ready to start?
I am paused on Universal Stars.
Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
paused 0 seconds in.
I am also 0 seconds in. MB, are you set?
I am 0 seconds in as well.
And we should say
Okay.
this is right before the old, timey original Universal logo.
Yes, for people that are playing along at home, I didn't explain the rules. I should probably do that. Anyways, I'm going to play the movie Jaws. The rest of the hosts are going to do the same thing. And we're going to talk over the movie. You won't hear the movie unless you're playing it in your house. I recommend you put it on mute and listen to our words and not the shark's words.
Not the sharks.
Otherwise, this commentary is for nothing. Subtitles are very useful.
You know all that great dialogue Bruce has?
Right. We're about to start the movie. I am going off of the Universal Blu-ray.
That's fine.
If you're doing the same at your house, you'll note it has two intros, the new Universal logo and the old Universal logo. We are starting at the old Universal logo. So sync yourself up with that.
All right. 1, 2, 3. Ah, those stars. We've all lost an entire childhood in those stars.
Hoopa. Hoopa, 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 hoopa. Hooper. And that's going to be the next 2 hours, just me singing the Jaws theme with Hooper's name, and maybe some of the other cast members.
Just to make this as weird as possible, am I the only one who ever thought that Earth looked delicious as a child?
Yes. Yes,
It looks like it's made out of ice cream, doesn't it?
Do you guys have a preference on your Universal logos? I'm partial to the one from the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
I'm a full old, like a new age 90s Universal logo fan.
Same here.
I mean, the new one's really cool and shiny, but you just can't beat all the old, like, black and white glamour shot ones.
God, I love the score.
I like how epic the current one is.
I like how Universal is one of the few logos that still has gravitas. Like, it actually means something when you're watching a Universal production. I mean, it shouldn't, but it still has that.
Wow.
Cold-blooded, man. Cold-blooded.
Was that Matthew McConaughey from... No.
Season 1 of True Blood. Or
True Blood.
True Blood.
True
Matthew
Detective.
McConaughey.
They're all the same.
All right. I stay the same age. The werewolves get younger.
Zeneck and Brown.
I like how, for a movie that nobody really thinks of as horror, this has the most horror movie opening ever. A bunch of kids getting stoned on the beach and drinking, then two saunter off to get laid and are killed by a slasher.
Pretty much, like, the whole first half of the movie is just a fancy slasher flick. You know, you got the shark stalking people.
That's
pretty
kind
much
of,
it.
It's kind of weird because it's like, it's almost this weird sort of mystery film, even though you know what the mystery is. You know it's a shark, but the movie does a good job of playing it up as if you don't know what exactly is under the water. It's like
A boat propeller.
It could literally be anything dragging her down because you don't see it. In your mind's eye, there's still that sense of doubt, even though you intrinsically know that it's a shark. It's Jaws. I mean,
It makes me wonder, what did the people first watching this movie in, like, drive-ins that opening weekend think? Like, were they fully cognizant that it was going to be a shark, or did they expect it to be a space alien or something?
It's got that bitchin' poster, so I feel like they had to have known.
Or did they think it was going to be a mutant shark from another world or something?
Had a pretty massive ad campaign.
That's true. Universal really spent big buck on this thing, getting it out, and it was like in more theaters than any other movie at that point. Something nuts like 500 theaters or something, which today is nothing. But
Yeah, speaking of the movie being like, you know, a slasher movie, a monster movie, all these other kind of things, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but to me, Jaws is like pure cinema.
Yeah.
oh yeah, it is. It is adventure cinema at its finest, while at the same time being several other things, which is always the best type of film.
Because, I mean, back, early films were never one thing. Like, movies more or less evolved to be, you know, one genre at a time. Back then, it would be a musical, a comedy, a horror, a drama, all these kinds of different things. Jaws is like the epitaph for that sort of style of film.
Yeah.
Or it's a pirate movie, it's an adventure movie, it's a horror movie, it's a monster movie, it's a human
mystery.
drama.
one thing I thought was kind of interesting, I took a horror cinema class back in college, and part of it was when Dracula came out, they didn't really know how to advertise a horror film because that wasn't really a thing. There weren't like other horror films to base it off of, and how do you tell someone who's never seen a horror film, hey, yeah, come to the theater, be scared, you'll love it. So they would try and do stuff like, it's part romance, part adventure, and they would just like try and find different terms to throw at it because they didn't really have a good way to describe what the hell Dracula was to people who didn't know what a scary movie was all about.
Meanwhile, Jaws is just full on. It's like, it's going to be a bad time. People are getting eaten.
That should be the trailer. It's gonna be a bad time. Jaws.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think that Jaws, in many ways, was a prestige drive-in exploitation film.
I just want to talk about that first scene again for a second, because there's always this feeling in the pit of my stomach like it's claustrophobic as hell, because she's in the middle of the ocean, several feet away from shore. Like, there's no way she'd get there short in time. She's just, it's this weird trapping feeling that Spielberg expertly does.
That's why it's so much better that they filmed it in, all problems aside, they filmed in the ocean, because the ocean has always, no one really captures the fact the ocean is very claustrophobic despite being this large open space. It's pretty terrifying.
And you can't fake the ocean at all.
No.
You have to shoot on the ocean.
What I like about it is, considering it's on the ocean, it's actually a pretty static shot when Chrissy's thrashing back and forth. And nowadays if they were to film that scene, it'd just be like, okay, well, let's just have a ton of cuts, just move the camera all over the place, try and get that frantic action. But instead they just let the scene play out and let the action be the action. They don't
so
make
much
the camera
more terrifying.
be the action. And then when she disappears, everything is very still. It's like she doesn't matter. She just disappears and the surroundings are still very calm.
And plus, aside from that, it's like, aside from the POV of the shark, you don't actually ever see them like try to cut it underwater. Which nowadays I feel like it's like there would be a ton of cuts underwater trying to signify exactly what it is, trying to spell it out for you.
There'd be a money shot.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, with this, it's like all you see is her thrashing about on like the surface, and you just see her entire thing from beginning to end, and never once do you get like any sense of someone else's point of view except for those couple of shots.
And is it just me, or is like the underwater shot, the POV of Chrissy, just kind of her legs dangling in the water, a bit of an homage back to the Creature from the Black Lagoon?
I've always kind of felt that way, yeah.
Because I feel like the Creature from the Black Lagoon, Steven Spielberg, I'm sure must have saw that as a kid or something, and it could have inspired him. I'm assuming it did. I feel like this is the evolution of what that movie was.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the early monster movies, especially the creature features that features like sea monsters and all that, I mean, there were definitely inspirations going into this that went beyond the novel. I mean, you can tell just in the way it's made, just the way it's filmed, the way it's structured, the way it's rewritten. Like, everything is this weird amalgamation of everything pre-70s.
I feel as though part of the reason this movie hooked people the way it does, and had such a tremendous crossover appeal, is that in many ways it was essentially a monster movie, but the 70s version of a gritty reboot of that concept. This is a monster movie that requires virtually no suspension of disbelief. There's nothing to throw popcorn at. It's just a big motherfucking shark.
Yeah, which is so genius, because those are always seemingly the types of movies that work the best, is when they're working off a simplistic concept. Like, nowadays you see slasher movies that try to overthink it, that try to reinterpret the wheel and reimagine how slasher movies are even interpreted. This one is just, it's a genre piece that's also a character piece, but ultimately it's a shark. That's all it is, and it's something that we all know happens. It doesn't happen as frequently as it does in this movie, but it's like, aside from that, that's the only real exaggeration, is the fact that it distinguishes man out to be something that could be edible.
And you have this great shot right here of just Brody turning and just looking back at the ocean.
Yeah.
And just holds there for a minute.
Which he does again later on after his son gets attacked.
And it's just such a great setup moment for the entirety of the film.
I know. And especially considering Brody's character arc, which is so simple yet understated, and at the same time focused. It's spinning so many wheels. Like, this movie is brilliant at just doing so much with one scene.
Because all this that you're seeing right now, it's a great marrying of, this moment with the shark, cause of death. But there's all this great visual storytelling that's, setting the plot up and moving that with, Brody's facial expression. But all the actual things you're hearing is just setting up character and feelings of the town. And it's Spielberg did a great goddamn job.
It's so naturalistic, too. Like, everything just kind of slowly evolves rather than just being a slow-paced film.
Yeah, there's no particular need to beat you over the head with suspense or tension at this early point in the film. Everything plays out about like you would expect it to in real life. Things are bad, but they're casual. Like this investigation isn't the biggest thing happening on the island at the time. It's not treated like there's a serial killer loose.
Yeah. Like, the only thing you really need is that first scene, and then the rest of the film just kind of does itself. And I mean, up until the point where Quint shows up, it's just kind of still a straightforward film that just is about a small town trying to deal with this weird offshoot problem that is in the midst of like 100 other problems they have.
I do like that, the fact that there is a huge issue, but people have more pressing issues. I mean, there's a shark, whatever. They're not being eaten by a shark. There's not a shark on land. They don't have to worry about it right now. They're more concerned about what we just saw. Yeah. That guy's not going to get supplies till August, which doesn't do him any good. He needs that stuff now.
Yeah, nobody knows that a movie plot is happening.
And also the fact that it's like they're trying to conserve the visiting, like the visitor population and the tourist attractions. It's just all these little things that you would never think of with an association of a movie plot, but it works for this because like that's the entire foundation of the small town like Amity.
Small side, I really want that blazer.
We all do.
Looking at it in Blu-ray for the first time, where you can see the threads of those tiny anchors.
Oh, so nautical, so naughty.
Going back to Nautical, a collection by Cody Elft.
Just smells like seaweed and rotting cod.
But going back to what MB was saying, I also think that's, too, is part of the crossover appeal of this movie, that its stakes are rooted very much in the real world and very much in a blue-collar aesthetic. There's not really any melodrama going on. I mean, someone in the 70s, like somebody's uncle watching this movie who doesn't give a shit about any of this Hollywood crap can watch this movie and think, oh, this guy's a cop and there's a death on the beach and they're all really worried about whether or not the tourists will be scared away because that's their livelihood. Like something anyone can get invested in.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking about this earlier today, and if you look at the history of horror films, jump back to the 1930s, and pretty much every Universal monster movie was, or it could be boiled down to, some sort of fancy aristocrat, a baron, or a lord or someone very rich, very powerful, encounters like the supernatural, or, something outside of the realm that normal people would be able to cope with. And it was very much escapist entertainment. Then we get to the 50s, and it becomes slightly more common-based, like, it'd be a bunch of high school kids running away from an alien life form, like in The Blob. But it's still a larger-than-life issue. It's still the alien that's trying to destroy the entire planet. And Jaws feels kind of unique because it's a start of a turn in cinema where horror isn't about escaping and looking at, unrelatable people having huge problems. It's about people like you having somewhat relatable issues. I mean, a maniac with a knife, that theoretically is something that could happen to you. A killer animal? Unlikely, but it could still happen, which makes it more frightening. A boating accident at sea? Not really a horror film, but you have to respect the possibility that, dying at sea is something that could easily happen. And there are so many people that live on coastal towns. I mean, it's not an alien trying to take over the world. It's a common, real threat.
And
which makes Jaws need more
terrifying. Everybody at some point or the other has gotten into the ocean.
Or felt seaweed and just assumed they were going to die.
I've never been in the ocean. After this film, I never will.
Land sharks will get you. I've seen sand sharks. It can happen.
Hey, you guys spend a lot of time in the water or at marinas or anything like that as a kid?
I'm from Wisconsin, so no.
I live by the water, but I've never learned how to swim, so I'm strictly a beach bum.
When I was growing up, I was constantly on a boat, constantly in the ocean or a river, always at marinas and stuff. So Jaws had a particularly effect. It never made me scared of the water or anything, but it had this effect where I think in combination with how Jaws is shot, it's very natural. It's almost kind of down and dirty. Like, it's a beautiful film with amazing cuts like what's happening now, with the feet walking back and forth. It's very cinematic, but it's very... There's a lot of grit to everything that the camera's pointed at. Yeah. So I think combination of that and knowing I can literally know what the smell is like everywhere they're at. Like, I know the feeling of the wood and Quint's shack and how that would feel, and the water, the smell of the air. Jaws has always had this very strange effect on me. Or I can actually feel like I'm there in the scene.
Yeah.
Or you're just terrified that they're all at the beach right now. Your least favorite place?
No!
They're gonna get sand in their shorts.
Sandworms.
Yeah,
ain't no joke.
Marinas have such a particular smell, and it's like, yeah. Whenever like Hooper's just getting to the dock, like, I know exactly what that area smells like. It has a very particular effect on me.
You're like Hannibal in that way. Weird. But I mean, Jaws just, there's something about it. Every single scene is almost its own mini-movie in a weird way. But it all fits together seamlessly. It's kind of incredible, especially knowing the trouble they had filming this.
It is something, again, that harkens back to older cinema that was more influenced by stage plays than by other cinema, which is every scene has a complete beginning, middle, and end. Every scene is a complete sentence that's meant to, in some way, stand on its own.
Yeah. It has a level of quality to it and attention to it that I don't think we have ever held on to since.
These days, movies just feel like one long act.
Yeah.
Well, the visual storytelling there. We don't have to be told that the dog was just eaten, but seeing the dog swimming in the water before the guy throwing the stick, and just the stick floating by itself tells you everything.
And then,
so he gets away without having to murdering the dog on screen. But still pisses off animal lovers. It has everything.
Yeah, but at the same time, you could also just say, oh, well, it just swam elsewhere, and we don't have to think about the shark eating a dog because that's depressing.
So I just love how out of nowhere, geyser of blood. Like, that's so disturbing compared to how serene things were just a few shots earlier.
And especially considering it's like, oh, it goes after a small boy. That's disconcerting.
It escalates very quickly.
Yeah.
It also shows the shark is super intelligent because it realizes that human young are much tastier than adults. It's kind of like eating veal. This is no shark to mess with. It's smart.
And it's got that Roman Polanski quality where it's just the shark attacking the boy is just there. It's like it's practically in your line of sight as if you were sitting on the beach watching it yourself. That's incredibly disturbing on a visceral level.
Also, seriously, how old is this one?
The way Spielberg shot it, just no focus on the kid actually being attacked. It's just there's people in the way, there's people walking in front of the camera. It's so much more terrifying for that reason, and so much more real. It's like you're just sitting on the beach. You're in Brody's POV.
Okay, real quick, I just want to point out, I believe that this is the man that Paul F. Tompkins has spent his entire life trying to be.
In the center of the screen right now is, I believe, Carl Gottlieb, the screenwriter for this movie, who does not get nearly enough credit for his impact on Jaws.
Oh, yeah, he was the guy that essentially gave it life on the page.
He was brought in, he was supposed to do just like a week's worth of work to make the movie not funny, but have a little bit of a comedic edge in certain spots, kind of soften the darkness of it. Yeah. And instead, Spielberg just kept him on. And he eventually gave him a speaking role.
Yeah, Spielberg just gave him a simple mandate, which is give the film some sort of levity because it is way too serious.
Wasn't part of it because of the strike, so they had him just on as an actor to have him there?
Yeah. That's why they rushed the movie into production. They had to get it out before, any sort of strike hit.
Because they hired, because of the strike, they hired Howard Sackler to quickly punch up the script, and then they just had Gottlieb for on-set purposes, because they were still rewriting as they were going.
Yeah, they said basically Gottlieb and Spielberg and a couple others would sit together every night and discuss what should happen the next day, maybe dialogue-wise, or if any tweaks were needed to the script. So they were constantly, every day, just writing new pages or rewriting what already existed. On top of all the other problems they had, they also had to basically make the script on the fly.
Yeah. And that's why they were nearly shut down constantly.
Oh, they were nearly shut down for quite a number of reasons.
I'm curious, has anybody actually read the book Jaws was based on?
I've always meant to.
Same, I've
thought about it.
I have to be honest, it just never sounded particularly good.
Well,
it sounds compared to the movie really nihilistic and dark. It's very much sounds like a very 70s piece of fiction.
I think it's just it's kind of unfair to judge the book, I think, by what the film is, because there's two entirely different beasts. I mean, the book is focused also on this mafia subplot that is going on, and you cannot imagine that within the vicinity of what this film is. You cannot imagine Hooper and Brody's wife having an affair, and then Brody wanting Hooper to die at the hands of the shark because of it.
It's all in the director's cut.
The book is more like this story of this town wrapped around the story of the shark.
Yeah.
And this is more of a streamlined adventure film.
Which it retains that element of it, but it's just more, I would say, naturalistic, because it's not this brooding, horrific portrayal of humanity and portrayal of inhumanity being faced with humanity. Which is kind of, I think, what Benchley is kind of going for. Benchley was kind of a pretentious guy, I should say.
Well, by his own admittance.
Yeah. I mean, he was gonna call it Leviathan Rises, for God's sake.
Seriously?
Oh, there was all kinds of weird titles.
Yeah, the stillness and water.
Yeah, it's fascinating watching him develop the title, because it's like, Leviathan Rising, Jaws of the Leviathan. Maybe you should just call it Jaws. No.
Never.
I will say I wish that, like in the book, Quint had used an aborted dolphin fetus as bait. I just want that to be a MacGuffin in a movie.
That is going to be in the 5th Jaws movie that is made immediately after Spielberg dies.
Do you think that's ever going to happen? Like, we're going to get the Jaws remake? Or is that one of the Untouchables?
I think
when
that
Spielberg's
is
dead.
Well, yeah. Well, for one thing, yeah, it is going to happen when Spielberg is dead. But another thing is that it's one of those things that has such an inevitability behind it that really it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Like, the nature of the universe is not going to allow a Jaws remake to never happen.
But Jaws is such a seminal film, I feel like it's already been remade 100 times. Every time there's a killer shark film, it basically just has to be Jaws, and they'll tweak out character names and just be made shittier.
Yeah.
Like, Sci-Fi Channel, for years, is just based off of ripping off Jaws and taking the sharks and putting them in a different environment. Hey, what if these sharks were in the sand? What if we called it Jurassic Shark? What if they came out of avalanches?
Well, what's fascinating about that is that, and the thing that I've always loved about Jaws is that it's really the one film of this subgenre that's gotten it right.
Yeah.
And it was the one that started it. So, basically, it's the only one that should exist. Because no other shark movie has managed to receive this level of acclaim or receive any level of recognition whatsoever beyond, Deep Blue Sea.
Oh, God. I feel the same way about The Exorcist. All exorcism films kind of ape The Exorcist because it just did it so well the first time. There's very little room to actually improve on that. There's definitely ways to do it, but it's tough. More to what's happening on screen right now. I just love the fact that when this movie came out, there was pretty much no knowledge on, well, not no, but there was very little knowledge on sharks, especially among the common population. We didn't have Shark Week or anything to go off of. So, when they're going through the books and they're seeing all these weird pictures of sharks and they're talking about how they don't even know how long they live, that was all pretty accurate at the time. These were just mystery killing machines to them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I mean, it really prays off the fact that sharks were virtually an unknown species at that time because nobody had really dealt with them in terms of, like, major coverage in terms of the media, because I think it was actually Benchley himself that said, like, he was inspired to do the story because he read a story about a giant shark that was captured off of Cape Cod, and that had been really the first time that it gained national recognition for that sort of thing. He was like, well, wouldn't it be interesting if this were, like, in a small town or a small, like, ravine?
It is fascinating to think that Jaws is almost single-handedly responsible for putting sharks in the public consciousness.
And in the endangered species list.
Yeah, but also, to be fair, it's also in a retroactive way led to more of a conservationist sort of mentality where people want to know more about sharks, so people want to protect sharks, and that's why a lot of sharks are protected now by law.
I mean, Benchley himself, try his hardest, until the end of his life to make up for making people kill sharks.
In the same way that Joel Schumacher is responsible for killing Batman, he's also responsible for giving us, the Dark Knight. So really, it all evens out.
To be fair, Batman was never on the endangered species list.
He was after the nipples.
Oh, God. But, I mean, it is fascinating to think of this movie as such a defining piece of culture that even the food chain is affected by it.
And this movie affected nature.
Yeah.
That is a huge thing about the movie. Like, at the time, it made $400-500 million, which is astronomical in 1970s money. Like, to think about that, how many people must have seen the movie, 3-4 times? Whole families going out.
That's
just the impact it had. It's the start of, like, the mega blockbuster.
That's the thing you got to consider. Like, in these days before, VHS, if you didn't see a movie when it was out, and you didn't have the kind of town that would keep movies around for longer than a couple of weeks, you had to see it over and over and over again those first couple of weeks to tattoo it onto your brain.
Well, they also had this thing where the production studio gave it a limited release because they wanted people from out of state to come to see the movie. And it worked. It actually paid off to, like, a huge gamble. And you have to kind of respect Universal at the time because they knew how to push this movie.
They knew that a long line outside the theater was the best kind of advertisement.
And this was way before Star Wars. This was way before, the cultural icons of cinema that we know now. So really, this was kind of unheard of and unprecedented back in the day.
As I've said before, I find it fascinating that the first true pop culture movie, the first merchandising bonanza, the first movie everyone and their mom had seen was an adventure movie about 3 dudes in a boat hunting a shark. Like 11-year-old girls were walking around with Jaws lunchboxes.
I'm surprised they didn't get more action figures. That guy walking around with his pipe, that would be great. I'd buy a replica of that pipe.
That's really fascinating because it's such a deeply adult movie, yet it somehow still has this spirit of adventure that even an 8-year-old can get on board with.
By the way, I need to mention this. Hoopa!
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 What an interesting move, too. Like, the movie's pretty far along, and we're just now introducing pretty much the secondary lead. Yeah. I mean, we've seen Quint, but he's not really a factor in the movie until, later on still.
And has a slow-ass introduction.
Yeah, it just rolls out more and more. The first half is pretty much a setup. And it completely differs in tone, too. Like, it's, a horror slasher film. We're slowly unrolling the area. We're getting new characters. And then the second half is just all of them sitting in a boat and fishing. It's such a weird shake-up.
It's all eat up and payoff.
Can you imagine how many notes this would have these days?
Yeah.
Hooper needs to be introduced in the first act. Quint needs to be in the beginning.
Hooper needs a sexy girlfriend.
Hooper.
Well.
This part's reminding me that I really want to talk about the color palette of the film, which Spielberg has said they avoided, reds as much as possible. And there's pretty much no red. You see a couple burgundies here and there.
Yeah.
Just so that way when blood's there, that's what represents that color only. It really pops. But if you really look at the colors used, almost exclusively, it's blues, it's tans, it's yellows, it's blacks. And the blues, the blues are the ocean, the tans, the yellows, those are the beach. So everything kind of blends together color-wise. So then, boom, when red pops up, it really pops to the eye.
And also, everyone's really wearing blue. Like, the sky is constantly present and there's not a cloud in it. It's an insanely linear color palette, but at the same time, it pops for some reason, even when the blood's not on the screen.
And it gives off this very convincing sense of mellowness to the environment.
Yeah. But not in a way that feels intentional or forced.
Here's
Also,
a great part with the locals from Martha's Vineyard. Really give the film so much color and authenticity. Like, these were all just people they grabbed and basically threw into the movie that lived in the area. It's amazing because a lot of times they come up with their own lines. The line, Hooper asks, is there any good restaurants in town? They tell him, oh, walk straight ahead. That was something one of the guys just thought of and yelled out.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's an amazing line. Or the, a what? line. It's just, you wouldn't get that normally with a regular actor. So it's all lucky accidents with these guys.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were so just strapped for any casting. They were so strapped on budget. They were so strapped on location that essentially they were forced into making Jaws by what little means they had.
Which gets
introducing
so
real
much
sharks to the ecosystem and murdering locals.
By the way, I love the idea of, going back to that previous scene, there's one shark attack, a bounty is put up, and the entire town goes insane trying to kill this one thing.
And misses.
Big money, big money, big money.
That shark was too smart.
By the way, this is what happens.
I also like to, another great visual storytelling scene. We've already seen just the hand and the hermit crabs over it, and now they're going back over the remains, but they don't show them. The table comes out, you get to see everyone's reactions. We have to think, okay, this has been a couple of days since this attack has happened, so the body's probably deteriorated slightly. And, you can see Hooper fighting his reaction, but they keep it mostly hidden. You see a little bit of the gore there.
That weird-ass cut.
Yeah. It's amazing me that
But it really implies it more in your mind. You think about the details much more, and you have to imagine the smell.
Oh, it's so disturbing because here's Chrissy, and then he takes out a tray covered in the sheets. This is all that's left of her. It's very disturbing.
I'll say it fascinates me that as much as Steven Spielberg and George Lucas like to monkey with their old movies and fix every little thing that people have complained about, a lot that they haven't, no one's ever tried to fix this is what happens. So you'll remove shotguns from E.T., but that stays.
I think I've only ever heard it really explained once as well.
By the way, this is a real dead shark.
You can tell some of the extras in the background are kind of like gagging and coughing.
Oh, yeah,
It was not a pleasant smelling thing. They had to fight to get the shark in.
Oh, yeah. I think some of its digestive tract actually came up into its mouth and made it even worse.
Yeah, it was gnarly.
Oh, cool. Hence the flies.
You can actually see the flies on the shark. So I'm guessing that if you got to the end of the movie, you won't see one of those tags saying, like, no animals were harmed in the making of the film. They didn't actually kill the shark, to be clear, but they did buy a dead shark and have it shipped in.
Yeah.
It died of natural causes.
How happy the town is.
This happens once a month.
Just Quint laughing his ass off. How Quint just stays in the background for so long? Glad they removed some of his other scenes, like when he goes to buy the piano wire.
Yeah.
Number 2 piano wire.
Meanwhile, Spielberg's original version for the scene is insane.
Oh, so good.
where he has Quint just in a movie theater watching Moby Dick, just laughing his ass off.
And the most on-the-nose thing we can do here, guys. I know.
He's also smoking a cigar, and Gregory Peck was there with his family.
And the only reason it didn't happen was, ironically, Gregory Peck. Who, and not that Gregory Peck was like, don't make fun of my movie, just that I really don't like that movie, so can we just pretend like that didn't happen?
See, that's probably the same reason why Jaws hasn't been remade so far. When a person's big to the Universal Studios, they just have to leave them alone until they're dead.
Well, Spielberg's literally said that there will be no more Jaws sequels or remakes as long as he's alive.
Yeah, and I'm sure Universal will go with that because they don't want to piss him off. He's made him so much money in the past, it'd be stupid.
Yet somehow Canon still managed to pull off a Jaws film.
Yeah, it's a weird thought.
I wish Spielberg had allowed Jaws 3 People Zero to come to pass. Apparently he was the reason why that was plugged, because he didn't like the idea of them, doing a mockery of his work and himself.
Meanwhile,
the Revenge was okay.
Yeah, meanwhile,
that's
the
fine.
actual
Jaws 3.
I believe a big because I literally just heard Joe Dante talking about this. Like, a big reason was because Zanuck and Brown wanted it to be still PG. And Dante just wanted it to be like... National Lampoon wanted it to be R-rated. Because, yes, that was going to be a National Lampoon production.
That was going to be between Animal House and Vacation. Think about that.
And a little side effect, the fact that film didn't get made, Dante tried to reuse the title for Gremlins 2. Gremlins 2, People Zero.
That'd have been great. So we got the new badge.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that Mayor Vaughn's Hook jacket is amazing, but can we just marvel at his other jackets too?
Well, his fashion sense is impeccable.
I love his supervillain wardrobe.
Another interesting point about him, like if this movie were made today, at some point he would be in a boat that gets knocked over and he'd be devoured by a shark in the most gruesome way possible. But he gets off pretty light in this movie. It's an interesting touch. The worst he gets is having to sign a $10,000, release so they can pay Quint, and he probably won't get reelected, but we don't know that.
Well, Jaws too. I mean, he's still the mayor.
That is true.
Oh, yeah.
He's actually a dictator. Movies like Jaws remind you that not everything needs to be, karmically sewn up.
No.
The plot can keep going past characters. Not everybody needs to have their comeuppance served.
It's like something I heard someone recently talking about with the character of Walter Peck in Ghostbusters, and how if that movie were made today, there would be a subplot where it revealed that he was secretly in the pocket of Gozer all along.
Yeah, he can't just be a jerk. He's got to be evil too.
It's like, no, this was the 70s. They could just cover him in marshmallow goo and call it a day.
Finn.
It's a strange
Finn.
pun. Opa.
Opa. Quit playing with yourself.
Opa! Right.
That's a strange thing with modern cinema, where it's this unspoken rule that, okay, everything has to come full circle and be connected.
It's much more plugged into, meta kind of story logic. You want this guy, he's done bad, so he has to get punished, we have to see him killed. And I like the realistic edge this gives it. The mayor, who is very self-serving, eventually, he kind of gets away with it, but he feels sort of bad. He doesn't need a full comeuppance.
Yeah. Like, Brody has an arc where he gets over his fear of water, but that's not really a huge thing. That's just kind of interpersonal to him. Hooper doesn't really have an arc in terms of, like, he really just kind of goes along for the ride and is kind of there to provide the comic relief, which is perfectly fine and serviceable. Quint doesn't even get a resolution where it's like, nothing he does, it pays off in a good way because he gets eaten.
True.
That's
I want to
the
point out
real Jaws the Revenge.
I want to interrupt and just talk about the scene on screen right now, and another lucky accident where basically they were just doing this and Spielberg decided, okay, yeah, this has to be in the movie.
Oh yeah, Roy Scheider was actually the one that went up to him and said, look, check this out. And then they did the scene, and then Spielberg had him film it again. And that just led to, like, one of the most, like, it's just this thing in the middle of the movie that brings it such character and such warmth and such relatability because you believe that he's a father and a husband. You believe that he's just like a normal dude.
We need something to root for this guy too, because if you watch Brody's actions throughout the film, he's very afraid of the water. When the first attack happens, no, not the Prissy attack, but the first attack that he witnesses happens, he's too afraid to even enter the water. Like, he won't go toe deep into the water. We need a reason to root for this guy because we know he's not brave. He hasn't had any positive impact on the story so far, but he wants to be a force for good. And this makes him very sympathetic right here. So you really want him to succeed. He's a good person at heart.
Which is so unusual for a film in the 70s because up until now, it would have been this, like, huge macho dude who would be going after the shark. Like, originally the studio wanted Charlton Heston. And Heston
wanted the role.
Yeah, Heston wanted to be Brody and was pissed that he wasn't Brody, like, for years after.
But he'd be so wrong for the role.
Yeah, Spielberg was the one who didn't want him for it because he said there would have been no way that the audience would have thought that the shark would have lasted through the first act.
He just walks in there and punches it out.
I mean, after you've survived a apocalyptic holocaust of night vampires, then there's really not anything else that's going to measure up. After you've been the Omega.
And the Planet of the Apes. The single survivor of that.
And Moses.
I will say that Planet of the Apes was a truce.
That is true.
Get your jaws off me, you damn dirty sharks.
Apes 1, people 0.
Wasn't that what Beneath Planet of the Apes was?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I love Action Brody's scene of trying to get that bottle of wine open.
I just like it too because it really carries forward like his melancholy from scene to scene. It's a lot of times in movies you see like an action happens, but the weight doesn't carry onward. Like, a character will feel sad for maybe the next couple of seconds, but then they're fine the next scene. He is really bummed out by the fact that, he was accused of basically helping to murder a child. Yeah, as he should be. And it carries through this whole scene, and it really motivates him throughout the rest of the film.
This movie has amazing emotional continuity.
And also, just the number of cuts that it doesn't even have to make in order to keep the scene going. Like, it can have single shots go on for a very long time and still be captivating.
Mm-hmm.
Which you can't really do in a movie like today because...
Well, they're obsessed with coverage now.
No.
How can we edit our way out of this scene?
If I can backtrack just a little bit to the emotional continuity, that was one of the things that really bothered me about Jurassic World. And I think a lot of people felt the same way, and it just kind of stood out as a glaring, weird part of the film. The two kids are on the tram system and suddenly have a breakdown about their parents having divorced, which is very heavy. And then it promptly gets dropped. It's just not a part of the movie really anymore.
One of my biggest problems.
It's just such a thing, like, there's no emotional continuity there. This just gets thrown in. Whereas in Jaws, the emotional continuity is very tight. You don't suddenly have Brody having, like, a breakdown or, everyone just having a chuckle for no reason. It's all built up and release.
Yeah.
Also, another thing that I kind of love about this is Brody's fear of the water is never really explained. And
or explicitly stated. You gotta watch for him, they do mention, I heard you're afraid of the water.
But he never has this moment of this, sits down and has a speech about how he's afraid of the water and it's because of this or anything like that.
Which is is very emotionally, it rings true emotionally because 9 times out of 10, there isn't a rosebud to stuff like that. Sometimes people are just bothered by things.
Yeah, fears are largely irrational because they can't be explained by the individual. They just happen to be fears.
Although I would have loved to have seen Brody follow up Quint's Indianapolis speech with like this story about how he was in the bathtub when he was 3, like went underneath the water to get his rubber ducky, but couldn't get back up for a second, and it really freaked him out.
He's reading the script to Unbreakable. One thing I want to jump back and point out, I love the knife right before it goes in the shark, how it shimmers, it's got the bright light reflecting off of it.
Yeah.
That was totally a Hitchcock thing. There was some interview he was doing where he basically said, anytime I have a knife on screen, I want to see it blinding the audience. I want to see it shimmering with light, just give that extra sense of like it's alive, like it's dancing. And I think that's definitely something Spielberg picked up on and used for that scene.
I mean, Spielberg's flat out called out the fact that he decided that the shark didn't work just to make the film a Hitchcock film, and it's very much a throwback to Hitchcock. It almost seems like the town from The Birds.
Yeah, very much so. It would have been fascinating to go to another universe where the version of Jaws that was released was the one where everything went fine, and the shark is in half the movie.
It's a prestige Corman picture suddenly.
I sincerely doubt it would have had anywhere near the impact.
No.
It would have been a pretty cool movie that people kind of remembered.
I think Spielberg would have done a good job with it, but...
Oh, yeah, but it definitely wouldn't be as special.
I think people would think of it a lot like The Birds. Like, if you've watched The Birds anytime recently...
Yeah.
The special effects really are, you see birds on strings and really bad puppets, and you don't think of it as one of Hitchcock's greats, even though it's one of his classics. I feel like you'd probably get that with Jaws. Like, you'd probably get there's a lot of tension and good character moments and, great scenery, but it wouldn't stick the same way. Those effects would take too much away.
It wouldn't have scared the shit out of people. It would have been a monster movie.
Yeah.
Sure.
Which is, it's funny too, considering that the shark that they actually have in this, when they actually do get around to showing it, it's still not that great. I mean, there are a couple of moments where it looks fantastic, but overall it is just obviously a mechanical shark where they intercut it with footage of real sharks, and you can tell which is which very easily. But Mike and I were actually talking about this the other day. It kind of has this mythological quality within Jaws, where the shark isn't the actual shark, like Bruce, the shark that attacks, the bystanders, that is responsible for all this. It's not unlike those old paintings of old mythological creatures and sea monsters.
Yeah, that's what I've always loved about it.
Yeah, where it is a shark, but at the same time, there's something off about it. Like
it looks unreal, but in a real way, if that makes any sense.
There was, back in the day, that's where Moby Dick comes from, there was a very large seafaring mythology, and every time I've ever heard anyone say that the shark doesn't look like a real shark, blah, 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 it's like, it's not, A, not supposed to look like a real shark, but B, it looks like something a sea captain who saw a giant shark would come back and tell to somebody, and they would draw it in a newspaper. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's like, no matter what it looks like, you could literally have someone in a SpongeBob costume swimming around down there. You set it to John Williams' theme, it is going to be the scariest thing imaginable.
This summer, it is as if God created the devil and gave him paws.
Square pants. Yeah, also, I love, speaking of understated things that we constantly keep going back to with this film, the fact that Hooper is rich and it's not really a big deal.
This is the only time you see his boat.
It is a big underpinning between the tension of him and Quint, that he's hardworking, poor, he's, the fancy rich, he's got soft money counting hands. Although we really see Hooper getting down and dirty all throughout the film. He's the one who volunteers to go down in the shark cage. Right now they find the boat. He doesn't have a problem going down into the water, even though it's night in the shark's territory.
Yeah, Quint's kind of a jackass.
Yeah, it's unfair judgment against him, basically just because he's privileged.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I guess apparently privileged people are okay too. I don't know, I got lost somewhere in that point.
Well, not all rich men are as cool as Hooper.
Not all rich men.
I want to talk about this thing, because this fascinates me, that I've heard Spielberg talk about it. Which is after the movie screened, that the moment, the first time you see Bruce in the film, why don't you come shovel some of this shit, that, he designed it so there was kind of a joke there, and the joke would be, and the laugh would kind of go into a scream, and be this big screamy moment. And he said he saw it and it worked perfectly, and because of that, he said he got greedy. So he went back and then refilmed part of this scene in Verna Fields' pool. Which is the scene of Ben Gardner's head just coming out of that hole and giving the film really its first big jump scare, where Spielberg ultimately realized, oh my God, what have I done? I offset that mood entirely, because when he shot that scene,
he actually gave the audience this like unfair sense of anxiety for whatever was coming next, so they were always looking for something to be scared of.
And it's a very important lesson to horror films, I think, that the more, jump scary you get, each one, it's diminishing returns. Each one's going to be less and less and less and less and less.
Well, I heard Adam Green recently on a podcast make a very good point that a well-executed jump scare exists to establish that anything can happen at any moment, but if you play that too much or you play it at the wrong time, it just fucks the tension of the movie up completely.
Yeah.
This is such a brilliant scare. This made me jump like 100 times. I finally gotten to the point where it doesn't get me anymore. And right now it doesn't really work because I have the sound off and the subtitles on. Without the sound, that really doesn't get you. They did such an effective job putting the stinger in there.
Oh, yeah,
but I love the way it's just a camera put down and the head floats in. It's not quick, tricky editing or anything.
And Spielberg said he filmed, when he went back and filmed that, he filmed it several different ways for different types of timing until he got the perfect timing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and different, they had different sound effects be brought in, and he had them, test with audiences, not audiences, but just groups of people that would be in the sound booth. He would say, some of them would have effects, some of them wouldn't, some of them would just be completely off-putting. Until he finally found that perfect match, which is really what that scene came about, which ultimately, Spielberg's criticism of that scene, which he himself made, I kind of disagree with, because I feel like, yes, it does kind of give you this false sense of security being broken, but at the same time, that moment with Bruce is still insanely effective.
Oh, yeah.
But,
I think on an entirely different visceral level, as opposed to, the jump scare aspect that Spielberg wanted from it.
One thing I like about that scene is it's a great quality indicator, because if you think about it, if you stop and think about that scene, how much sense does it really make? The shark destroyed the boat and somehow ate everything but the guy's head, even though the hole is not fist-sized, but head-sized. It's kind of like Jurassic Park: The Lost World, where how the hell did the T-Rex eat everyone on that boat? That movie, people bitch and complain about it because it's not a great movie. This movie, nobody stops to think about the Ben Gardner being eaten somehow thing, because it's a great movie. You don't care. You're going to play along with it.
Well,
You don't complain when it doesn't work.
It's it's like the ending of the film with the shark, exploding. Spielberg got into an argument with Benchley about it because Benchley said that's ridiculous.
In Benchley's version of the film, for everyone who hasn't read the book, the shark is injured enough times where it just kind of bleeds out and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. It's very kind of
it's
anticlimactic ending.
Yeah.
So Spielberg wanted to punch it up and just say, fuck it, we're going to explode this bitch.
And, I mean...
in layman's terms.
And it is ridiculous when you think about it. It's unrealistic, and it's he blows the shark up.
He becomes Deadshot for that scene.
Yeah, but as Spielberg explains, if you do everything right, and you get the audience to believe in what you're doing, then at the end you can throw something in there that's completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then they'll go along with it because you've earned their trust. And they trust you in turn.
Yeah, and he was completely right for it by even Benchley's standard, who later admitted, that was completely the right call.
And people only become hypercritical whenever they're not having a good time.
By the way,
if they're on the internet long enough. I mean,
yeah.
No, I actually mentioned this scene was only filmed in one afternoon because they could only put that sign up for one afternoon per the town regulations.
And Martha's Vineyard loves them now. Did not love them back then.
No, not at all.
Interesting fact about why they actually film at Martha's Vineyard. It's not just because of the town. It's actually an important technical reason, which is Spielberg discovered that, about 12 miles out from shore, you could not see land, but more importantly, there was still a sandy bottom only about 30 feet below the surface, so they could do the shark. Which ironically didn't work, but they could do the shark.
It seems like a good idea at the time.
And that's
backtracking.
Yeah.
Do you think that scene was framed intentionally that way, where when the mayor is talking to them, the one-way sign is directly overhead? Kind of in you can only go this way. He's not presenting any alternatives. It's very much his way or the highway. Literally, the road's saying one way, and it's the direction he's pointed.
That's an interesting thought.
I'm not sure if it's a
that scene
happy
was-
accident or if it's something Spielberg would have done on purpose.
That scene was guest directed by Stanley Kubrick.
It's interesting. Going back to the color palette, it's whether or not this was intentional or not, but a lot of the tourists coming in have red backpacks, red bikes, red cars. It's interesting how they're almost showing them as food coming into town.
Oh yeah,
They're all
it's
red
very
shirts.
it's very much like they're being chummed.
Yeah, because they are literally they're literally chum for the shark.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't know if that would be intentional or not, but it's interesting to think about.
I think a lot of it's probably happy accidents that Spielberg was smart enough to preserve in the edit.
Yeah.
Or Verna Fields, too. I mean, if you watch any of the makings of, they give her so much credit for stuff, and you have to agree with it. She did an amazing job on this film, and if it wasn't for her hands, this film wouldn't be wouldn't be half of what it is.
Literally her hands, because they had to edit on, just the worst terms imaginable. Like they very nearly lost the footage.
Yeah, several times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was left in Spielberg's car.
But worse than that, it actually nearly sunk to the bottom of the ocean.
And Peter Benchley, ladies and gentlemen, actually doing his real job as a TV interviewer, but Verna Fields, besides being an excellent editor, also explained that she would get 3 shots a day, maybe, to edit. She did not have very much to edit at all because they couldn't grab much footage. So it's amazing. It's remarkable sometimes this movie was able to be edited together in any coherent way. Especially when you look at some of the outtakes, the shark broken, it's like...
Yeah. But I think that's the difference between modern and older filmmaking. With older films, it wasn't necessarily made in the edit. You had to know and film exactly what you needed and maybe a couple of coverage takes to save your ass. Whereas in a modern film, something like Ant-Man, the actors have basically gone and said, yeah, we'd film like 5 takes with different inflections and different setups, and they would just make it in the editing room. We didn't really know what movie we had on our hands until we sat down to watch it.
Going back just a second, could you imagine if they had lost the footage at the bottom of the sea? And that was like some kind of prize that people would be hunting for years, like it's pirate treasure? Like somewhere on the bottom of the sea is Jaws.
Well, it would have been weird because, like, when you think about it, would modern films even exist? Like, would the summer blockbuster tentpole season even be a thing if Jaws didn't exist?
It's one of those things it's impossible to imagine.
Yeah. You can't imagine a world where Jaws had never existed because it's just so ingrained in the culture by the time you're growing up. Especially later on if you're growing up in the 90s or the 80s where it's been around for at least a decade.
Well, with the economy taking as many hits as it has since this came out, like, would the American film industry still be as big of a deal these days, if not for the blockbuster being invented, the mega movie?
Yeah.
It's like, would we just basically have a studio version of independent cinema?
I mean, in a way, that's kind of what film was in a lot of ways, prior to Jaws. Like,
I mean, this is back in the days whenever stuff like The Godfather and Taxi Driver were, big studio releases.
It's just kind of amazing to look at Jaws and think that this film is 40 years old, but it still works pretty darn good. Like, it looks sharp. It still plays well. The jumps maybe aren't calibrated in the same way that a modern audience would be as receptive as something like Paranormal Activities, but it still plays great to me. It's people throw around the term timeless a lot when they're talking about movies, but I think Jaws falls into that. It's just so well made. It's still effective now, and it doesn't feel outdated.
Yeah. It's timeless, but at the same time, it's of its time. It manages to strike that balance, which I've always found impressive with films like that. And like the 1989 Batman, for instance, where you could watch that and still know it's in the 80s, but still take it in as if it's its own entity.
Yeah, it almost feels like someone went to go film a period piece, not that this was made in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it works on a level because really it's a lot better of a movie than a lot of current movies. So.
It's kind of like whenever you compare old video games to what we have now. What we have now is definitely more sophisticated and a lot more work and money and complexity goes into it. But the older stuff is just such an impressive work of machinery that it's hard to imagine. You see that a lot with movies from this era. It's like, yeah, we have better special effects, our visual storytelling is different. We can, in many ways, be more complex, but the machinery of this film is so perfect. It's like a well-made watch.
Yeah. It's not necessarily that it needs to be that sophisticated, because it is exactly what it needs to be.
Every single moment in this movie is the exact moment that needed to happen for it to be Jaws. There's a beautiful simplicity there. Like, there's absolutely no fat to this movie.
Yeah. The thing I want to talk about with this scene is its lack of score.
Oh, God. The false scare, really, where you're convinced that a shark is there, even though it isn't, but there's a clue given, which is that there is no John Williams theme to accompany it.
And something Williams felt very strongly about, and I think it's something that layers the film very well, which is the score would only signify the shark. The score could not be a red herring. It would be a stand-in for the shark when you couldn't show it in a POV shot or anything else, but it could not ever be a red herring for anything.
Which is very brilliant, because this scene, without the audience being aware, trains you to know that the score signifies the shark. The score is the shark.
And then when the shark does show up with no score, it scares the living hell out of you.
I guess as long as we have the score brought up, maybe now wouldn't be a terrible time to talk about it. But man, just such a perfect score. It can still scare the shit out of people 40 years after the fact, just by hearing that bum 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 bum. And it's saturated culture. Like, every little kid in the pool knows that theme and what it represents.
Well, it's one of those movie scores that have managed to do the impossible and infiltrate the real world. Like, it's not a movie score anymore. It's the scary water music. It's part of the score of life.
It's like the siren for danger in general, really.
Oh, it's actually literally a siren in Australia, where beaches in Australia play the Jaws theme if they want people to get out of the water.
That would definitely get me out of the water. I'd be gone.
Oh, yeah. I've gotten out of pools when I was a kid because I imagined the Jaws theme in my head.
Oh, we actually can see the shark now, kind of. Fins. This scene really stuck out to me as a kid, just in a couple seconds here, where we see the disembodied leg, that bloody stump floating to the bottom of the water.
Oh, yeah. That's the first thing that always jumps out to me in terms of my first memories of this. Oh, there he is.
Just the hint of the shark in the water, too. Like, that works so well. And I can actually see the full face.
Yeah. And then leg.
Oh, that was so scary to me as a kid.
A longer version of that shot actually gave the film an R rating.
Oh, and this shot, too, really freaked me out. Even though it's not underwater, just that weird gliding POV of the camera swimming past.
Yeah.
The shark is so supernatural in that shot, it's horrifying.
It only becomes a Sam Raimi film.
Pretty much. I don't know, that always kind of spooked me too, just that camera swooping over him, like it chooses not to eat him, even though it could. Yeah. The fact that the monster could just spare someone too freaks me out, like it's God.
Yeah. And I like how they just don't take the easy way out with anything, in terms of, like, even something as simple as that is like, well, why wouldn't the shark go after Brody's kid?
Mm-hmm. No, Brody actually has wet pants now. He's slowly going more and more into the water.
This is his step one of his journey of becoming Aquaman. Also, speaking of how they would do this today, it would be a studio note that Brody's kid had to be eaten by the shark so he could get revenge on it in the third act.
Of course.
And another slow zoom out shot into the ocean.
So you never really see people just do their jobs in film anymore.
No, they have to. I mean, even superheroes have to be motivated by a personal conflict.
I mean,
You gotta preach somebody.
the 80s were the decade of this time, it's personal. And I don't think we ever really moved away from that.
I love how that extra playing the doctor looks dead in the camera.
I was going to say, he's the one guy who's trying to refute my claims that this movie is timeless with his classic 70s hair. 70s doctor, save my boy.
It is weird how, like, virtually none of the leads have any, like, 70s affectations about them.
Well, Dreyfus is living 70s, to be fair, but...
Well, something that's always fascinated me about the way people view previous decades, which is they only remember the loud stuff.
Yeah.
It's like they forget, in the 80s, people didn't dress like the 80s. People didn't dress like the 70s. Like, there were people who dressed like that and had the fad haircuts and looked ridiculously like that decade, but it's like if 10 years from now you thought back to 2015, it's like, oh, everyone had gauges and mohawks.
I just love, like, if I were to go to Door County right now and walk around, it would look a lot kind of like Martha's Vineyard, the Wisconsin version, I guess. You'd be, near Great Lake instead of the ocean. But it still looks pretty similar to what's presented in this movie 40 years ago, like rustic seaside town. And even the hospital doesn't look that different than what you see nowadays. I mean, less big machines, I guess, in hallways, but more or less the same.
I was actually in a quiet tourist trap island beach community just a couple of days ago. I swear to God, it looked like Amity. I thought it was hilarious. It's like, wow, these kind of areas never change.
No. I think that's what makes the movie feel like it's timeless to me, because if you go into those places, 40 years has done nothing to them. They just look exactly the same. They even have, like, old-timey paint.
Martha's Vineyard is like a Jaws amusement park.
Oh, yeah, I've actually always wanted to go there.
It's like you went to Six Flags and, like, next to Gotham City and the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, there's Jaws.
Speaking of, I ever told you guys what my prized Jaws piece of memorabilia that I would want is?
The fake shark from the Universal Jaws ride?
No.
The shot glass?
It is a picture next to a tombstone. Now let me explain.
If I may interrupt for just a second here, I love how Quint is essentially testing Brody. Here, drink some of this. And he just stares at him while he drinks it because he knows it's going to, like, burn out any mortal man. This guy is just, he has to confront everyone when they come to him. He has to compare himself to them. Like, I'm a mighty man and you're fucking nothing.
He's like a wizard living in a shack somewhere.
He's got some issues.
He does. Anyway, sorry to cut off your tombstone story.
If I had a nickel. So, Quint's little poem, Here Lies the Body of Mary Lee, in a couple scenes from now.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, like, Shaw just ad-libbed that because he had saw it on a tombstone in Ireland. And I have been wanting to track that tombstone down and get a picture next to it.
I would like to get a picture of me swimming with bowlegged women.
Well, don't we all? Pay good money for that on...
I'd actually like a picture of me being devoured alive by a shark.
Well, yeah. These all sound great.
I mean, that's the ultimate Jaws memorabilia. You got to live the tale.
You know, somewhere out there, there's someone
goes
who's...
into the water. Shark tanks in the water. Are sharks in the water?
Somewhere out there, there's the ultimate Jaws fan who has, like, used all of his resources to be eaten by a shark. Like, I am Quint now.
By the way, you got city hands, Hoopa.
City hands. Got money your whole life.
And this was just Shaw and Dreyfus's actual relationship, so...
I know, that's... as bad as it is, like, as antagonistic as it is on film, it was nothing compared to how Shaw and Dreyfus actually were in real life, where they would be nearly in a fist fight every day.
Shaw would just challenge Dreyfus to do push-ups. To prove he was a man.
And to jump off the top of the orca and to, like, at one point, it's well known that Robert Shaw was a heavy drinker, like the heaviest of drinkers for even a 70s dude. So Richard Dreyfuss at one point smacked a drink out of his hand because Shaw asked him for help with something. And that was just like, the minute that happened, Shaw got a hose and sprayed it in his face.
Oh, if you've ever known an alcoholic, that is fucking shots fired.
Yeah.
The fascinating thing is, according to Dreyfuss, if they weren't on set, Shaw was the nicest guy in the world and they were good friends. The second they step onto set, he's Quint.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame too, because the role that immortalized Shaw was one of his last. Like, can you imagine like what Shaw would have been like years later?
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Probably.
My God.
I can see him doing a good Alec Guinness.
He's so whimsical.
And a lot of this was ad-libbed too.
Man just had a song in his heart.
Drunk.
That's like how the movie just goes, here's literally Ahab.
Going back to Williams' score, which I can't hear right now, but I'm assuming it's playing. A big part of why the switch works is because, again, of Williams. It goes from a slasher film in the first half, which he has scored perfectly with that primal, scary, iconic score, but then he moves on to something more adventurous, and it helps too because earlier he's introduced kind of mystery motifs too, so you're interested to see where this is all leading, and you're going along on the journey, which all of a sudden becomes just three men in a boat, and it becomes an adventure film, and the score reflects that.
To the point where it builds to this blasting, bombastic adventure theme at the end, like when they're all got the barrels on the shark and they're all racing towards him, and it goes like, da 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 da, and it literally plays like something out of Star Wars. And it's just like this quaint thing of three men on a boat. But yet you totally buy into it because they've earned that.
Williams was really the first person to even notice that, hey, this is actually a pirate film. We should score it like it.
And the whole time, Quint in the background. Hope you got your rubbers.
And there's the Mary Lee poem that's a real person. It's weird. She's forever immortalized in Jaws.
Or worse place to go.
And what I love is that the reason he says that is because Spielberg told him that he had to mess with her.
This is such a good shot. This is for as like down and dirty as it kind of is look-wise, it's so beautifully cinematically shot. Through the teeth and all that.
Spielberg's always been a genius at finding the beauty in the most mundane, gray of environments.
Yeah.
You see that very much in E.T., where there's nothing, like, over-the-top beautiful about that movie visually. It's just the suburbs, but it's shot by Steven Spielberg, so it's like a fairy tale.
Oh, he hasn't even, like, lost that quality, because even Lincoln has shots like that, where you just see him sitting there, and it's so visually haunting. And not just because of Daniel Day-Lewis, but just because, like, the way it's framed, the way it's shaped, the way the landscape is, he hasn't lost it for all intents and purposes.
I'd just like to point out, we're only like an hour, 15 minutes into this movie.
The pacing and efficiency of this film is to behold. We have literally watched an entire movie's worth of content.
See,
and that was just to introduce the three characters in the premise.
This is a frequent topic of discussion amongst us, which is up until recently, we were always convinced that Jaws was like 3 hours long.
Yeah.
But every time we sit down to watch it, it's like, oh, this is actually a 2-hour movie.
Oh, and it goes by like a 1-hour movie.
Nothing is wasted.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's long, even though 2 hours is actually kind of long for a movie now. I think the average length of a movie probably is, 90 minutes or something.
I think part of that is just watching this on network television as a kid, where with commercials it is like 3.5 hours long. God, Jaws was like Christmas for advertisers when we were growing up. It's like, oh, we can milk this for hours.
They're not going to turn away. In my case, that was true. If Jaws was on TV, I would have to stop whatever I was doing and watch it. I remember plenty of times, like, I would just be watching Jaws. My parents would be like, we have to leave, we're going. And I'd just be torn, like, standing halfway out of the house, like, I haven't turned the TV off yet. I can't actually go.
Mine was always Back to the Future. Like, if that movie was on as a kid, I was staying there. I didn't care if I was hemorrhaging blood.
Oh, I watched so many television repeats of Jaws that I actually didn't own a physical copy of Jaws until I was like 17.
Yeah, same here. I had to get a job, and that was like one of the first movies I pulled out of like a Walmart bin. And I was so proud of myself because I had money and I could buy like the 30th anniversary or 35th or whatever it was at the time, like edition of the DVD. Came with a booklet. I was so excited.
Jaws is like Star Wars or The Nightmare Before Christmas, where it's a movie that you almost don't have to own because it just seems to belong to everybody.
It's one of those.
It's just there.
It's one of those cultural osmosis films.
Well, when was the first time all of you saw Jaws?
I was 6 years old, I think, and I distinctly remember renting it. I don't remember the exact reasons why. I don't even know if I was the one that chose it, but I remember sitting down and watching it and not really paying attention to most of it until the scene with the leg being chopped off, or the leg being bitten off. And that was when it kind of got my attention. And weirdly enough, that's when my interest in sharks in general was kind of spawned. Because I have been a lifelong, enthusiast for sharks and different types of sharks and different breeds. And I always making a point to try and see, if there are any nearby, zoo attractions or anything that have live sharks in them, because...
So you can battle them.
Yes, indeed. But yeah, it was ingrained in my memory at 6, and it never left.
What about you, Mike?
Probably, I think 5 is probably my earliest memory experiencing Jaws. That was probably around, because I know it was a big film with my parents and stuff, and my grandfather.
Did you appreciate it at an early age, or did that come later?
No, definitely at an early age. It kind of, I think part of that help was that I was always on the water so much, and I love the water, that it kind of helped hook me, and really sort of, something kind of mesmerizing for me. And in a way that even I saw Star Wars probably around the same time, and there's something different about Jaws for me. Once again, I think I had that water element that it felt like it was something I was personally connected to, the world that it was in.
Meanwhile, with me, I think now thinking about it, one of the things with me was that really this was the first horror film I'd ever seen. Or the first monster film, or the first any type of those kinds of genres that I was exposed to, because I've been largely raised on kid films, on cartoons, and occasionally something else would sneak in there that would kind of catch my interest. But ultimately, this was kind of the first introduction to something quote-unquote adult, or of a certain genre that would kind of come to define my life later on.
I've said that the films that defined who I am as an adult, essentially, and set me on the course for being Mike, for all horrible intents and purposes, would be Jaws, The Empire Strikes Back, Batman, and Clash of the Titans. Those were the things that I would watch constantly, and would always kind of be in my head.
For me, I just remember, I didn't really care what the movie was, as long as it had a cool poster. If the VHS had a cool cover art, I'd be really interested. And as a kid, just seeing the cover art for Jaws, even as an adult, it's just such a cool, iconic image that you have a hard time avoiding it.
It's visceral.
So I don't remember the first time I watched Jaws, but I could guess that it's probably because I saw that poster on a VHS and begged my parents to let me rent it.
It is one of the most brilliant images of all time as far as a poster goes, because it's one thing. It's a shark swimming upwards, and there's a girl there at the top. But it just gives you such a vivid image of what the film is, and at the same time, what the film isn't. It leaves so much to your imagination, but at the same time tells you exactly what you're getting into.
Well, it's the fear that's in the back of everyone's head whenever they get out into the water. That thing that's just below you enough that you can't quite see it, but you know it's there.
Yeah.
You know there's always something dark over the horizon.
And a little bit of a fun fact there, the artist Roger Castamel had the original painting stolen on him like 4 years ago when he was out promoting the film, and it's never resurfaced. So somewhere out there, the original Jaws poster art is floating around, or probably in some collector's mansion somewhere.
Yes, and I'm here to make a confession.
Time traveler, Mike.
Also, another thing about that cover was that it was commissioned as kind of just this random thing for this dude who was doing novelization covers. He basically did that cover for the novel, like the re-release of the novel, and it was just like one of like 100 assignments. So he basically just did it and then gave it to the studio for free.
Yeah, they just asked like, "Hey, can we use your book cover for the movie too?" Yeah, sure. And he never got any. He never got paid for it, or I guess any residuals or anything.
One of the most iconic images of all time.
It's like him and George A. Romero are the two guys who changed cinema and didn't get a penny for it.
Because if you've seen the original cover art for Jaws, like the actual book, it almost looks like someone's shooting a torpedo up out of the water. Like it's just the most
it's really odd looking.
Bland shark shape I've ever seen.
Yeah, just black on, well, gold on black. Weird type thing. And it looks more like a whale than a shark.
It looks like a sperm whale for no reason.
Yeah, there are no teeth on it or anything. It's just a oblong shape.
It actually looks very similar to what a shark actually looks like.
Right, not nearly exciting enough.
Yeah, it's just like basically a bull shark or something. It's not a great weight at all.
Oh, and here's the full reveal. Brucey.
Bruce. Or, as Carl Gottlieb marked down in the Jaws log, that son of a bitchin' bastard rig, as the crew like to call it.
Except Scheider.
Yeah, Scheider has a weird thing about never calling it Bruce. He never explained why. He just had this odd respect for it.
Yeah, Bruce was the lawyer for Steven Spielberg, so apparently that's where that came from.
Well, is, actually.
Still alive?
He's still Spielberg's lawyer to this day.
He lives inside of that Mick now.
It's a really fascinating design if you look at how this shark was set up, because underneath the water, like 30 feet down, they basically made a track that was greased up, weighed a couple tons, and they had this giant shark on top of it that could ride the track and just pop up when need be and back down.
Oh yeah, and it was like on a dolly, so it was kind of this weird rig that extended all the way to the bottom of the ocean floor.
And surprisingly never worked.
That's what happens when you don't test it in salt water.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like the only reason it didn't really work was because they hadn't factored in the fact that salt water dissolves everything.
Well, part of it, too, was they were in such a rush to get this movie out before the strike that they didn't give the guy who was making the special effects enough time to perfect his gags. So they cut weeks and weeks out of the guy's schedule for designing the shark, and they just had to run with what he had.
Yeah, I think he's pretty much explained. He did 2 years' worth of work in pretty much a month.
Yeah, so it's a miracle they got to work as well as it did considering the time constraints.
And it is a hell of a design. It's brilliant how they set up to do this. It's way ahead of its time considering when this film was put together.
And I would say even like arguably never have we actually done anything like that again, close to like the Alien or the T-Rex from Jurassic Park.
So I don't know, they got to work at the Universal ride pretty well.
Yeah, Universal.
Okay, Mike, you have a story about the Universal ride.
Goddamn Universal ride. I was so excited to go on the Jaws ride, and I get there. And granted, this was probably more memorable than the Jaws ride by itself. The guy, he actually looked a lot like the doctor who looked dead in the camera, actually, now that I think about it. He had like the long blonde hair. Didn't give a shit. Just, hello, everybody. He just sang his lines monotone and straight. essentially just saying, stopping short of just saying, I want you all to leave. Just picking up the grenade launcher, like, kind of just waving it and then putting it back down before the pyrotechnics even go off, signifying that he shot it. Steering with one hand, because he's kind of fake steering, because it's kind of on a track. He didn't give a fuck.
Smoking a cigarette, drinking a beer.
Essentially, he just... Yeah, there's this shark here, and, yeah, we're coming, I'll try to get them to safety, and...
And how old were you when this happened?
12?
Hey, what I want to know is, how much does life have to beat you down before you are jaded about shooting an animatronic shark with a rocket launcher?
Pretty jaded.
Times, man.
I'm sure about, like, the 18th time on your first day.
Oh, yeah, that has to be
In 108-degree weather.
So here's one thing that's always confused me, and maybe someone smarter here can explain it to me. Hooper runs back into the boat and grabs the tracking light. Runs back, ties it to the barrel, the whole while Quint's yelling at him.
Oh,
And Hooper has a line, your turn now, Quint. And when the shark gets away, there's this look on his face like he's really disappointed. What was the significance there? Was there something more than just the strobe light? Or was there a poison, a tracker? I don't get why it feels like Hooper's trying to one-up Quint, and it's not working. But the film never really dives into that for me. At least I never understood it.
He's trying to track it or give some semblance of they know when it's coming, because I feel like it's him trying to use his science to one-up Quint's old, scurvy dog ways.
But I feel like the big, giant yellow barrel would already kind of do that. I mean, that's the purpose of the barrels. You put enough on there where it keeps the shark up, where you know where it is when you see the barrels.
Somebody wanted to use science.
I've always actually wondered about the tracker the same way. I assume that's what it means, but I don't know what the greater significance of Hooper's plan was. Hoopa!
Okay, and
shot at Quint.
Like, he's kind of smiling there, too. It almost felt like he knew that, Quint was trying to one-up him and just it didn't work. I don't know. I feel like there's almost something implied there that just didn't go in. Also, that's like the one editing spot I think is weak in the whole film, where Brody's still talking and has the fade out to Quint just on the bow of the ship in silhouette.
Yeah.
They needed that information there, but they couldn't just cut around it, or they didn't have enough footage to make it end naturally into that fade.
I mean, did you forget this is what happens?
This is what happens.
By the way, here comes the single... I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but this is probably the single greatest sequence in cinema for me.
I mean, I
goes from laughs to like, oh, and now I'm sad.
And it's such a hell of a speech, especially since, I mean, at the time, I couldn't imagine what it'd be like to be in a theater at the time when the Indianapolis was new in the news back then. I mean, it only recently had come out. Spielberg had never even heard of it before. Sackler is the one who came up with the Indianapolis speech.
And it was actually, like, punched up even by John Milius.
John Milius, of all people, wrote a 9-page version of the Indianapolis speech.
Yeah.
Which then Shaw took.
Yeah, Shaw, who, by the way, was an accredited playwright of his own, he actually took it and pared it down.
Yeah. And then they all threw back ideas. I mean, Scheider was the one who came up with the doll's eyes line.
And then combine that with the fact that Shaw is drunk for half of the shots during this scene, and they just edited it between a piss-drunk take and a sober take. This is the ultimate Frankenstein monster of scenes in movie history, and it creates one of the most memorable scenes in movie history.
And yet you can never tell, like, whenever he goes to that speech, you can never tell which one is him drunk, which one is him sober, because it's all one seamless performance.
It's interesting, though, too, the length of the shots. They just basically bolt the camera down here for a lot of this and let the scenes play out, especially when they get into the Indianapolis talk. It's a very, very, very long take, and it draws you in, and you're forced to pay attention to it because the camera's not cutting. It's kind of like when you're giving a speech. If you say a lot of things very fast, it adds energy. But if you add a lot of ums and 3-second pauses, you seem aimless. But if you hold for like 10 seconds and don't say anything and just make eye contact with your audience, they know what you're saying is really important, and you're using that pause to draw them in. And essentially what Spielberg's doing here by planting the camera and just leaving it dead on filming without changing angles every 20 or 2 seconds.
By the way, quick note about the scar that Brody looked at, like, really unimpressively. That was an actual scar of his. It was just a incision from where he had his appendix removed. And I think he actually ad-libbed that.
Interesting side note. I think it's, I don't remember who it was. I feel like it was either Zanuck or Brown. Or it was somebody involved with the film. I don't remember who. It said that they got a call or something that somebody's housekeeper had taken off because they had just watched Jaws and they just realized how their son died. Because that's how new the Indianapolis was, and that's how, you know...
That's how America found out about it.
Yeah. Actually, I think that was Benchley.
It might have been Benchley, yeah.
So on a lighter note, I love the composition of this scene. You've got Hooper in the background, and you're using him basically as your reaction just signifier, because he's very dead-faced, and he goes from being laughing to stone-face. You've got Quint a little more animated, kind of laughing, smiling, drinking, then sneering, but he's expressive. You've got the sea bouncing up and down in the background through a dirty window. You've got the light shimmering back and forth as it swings with the tides. I love the motion. I love the contrast and emotions. The whole thing is just set up wonderfully, and then you get the long, long take of it where the camera does not cut away, or if it does, it's very briefly and right back. It's like you never left.
And also, you have Dreyfuss in the background who, by his own admission, could not take his eyes off Shaw when he was doing this speech, because
it doesn't look like he's blinking. Well, there's one, but it doesn't look like he's blinking much.
Well, yeah, he's not even really, he's not acting at all. He's literally just...
He's marveling at Shaw's performance, because even to them, this was amazing.
And it's such a small detail, but the light bobbing back and forth, making this perfect metronome to the monologue is... I don't know if that was intentional, but if it wasn't, that was one of the most beautiful accidents in modern filmmaking.
They weren't actually on a boat when they filmed this, were they?
Yeah,
this was on dry land, I thought, so it's like a stage, so they would have had to been doing all the shaking on purpose.
They were on a boat, but it's not like they were out to sea for the scene. They were probably docked.
Yeah. Well, actually, the windows are kind of mocked up, I think those was like one of the only real effects that were used beyond like the mechanical ones, which was that they kind of tried to color match the windows to how it would actually look in terms of like the rest of the scene or something like that. I forget the actual details of that, but beyond that, yeah, they filmed on a real boat. It was called the what's the original name of the Orca?
The Warlock.
Yeah, the Warlock.
Nobody told Spielberg that renaming a boat is terrible bad luck.
Yeah.
Least of all, a wizard boat.
But they actually had two of them. They had one that was going to be used for regular filming, and then they had one that was designed to sink at the end. Guess which one actually sunk?
It's funny, the second Orca, the submersible one, was actually beached up on like some random patch of land for decades and became, for a while, like this weird pilgrimage that Jaws fans would make to go and see the wreckage of the Orca.
Yeah.
And steal a few pieces.
Oh yeah, steal a few pieces and then steal large pieces and then eventually just take virtually the whole thing until
I got the steering wheel.
Yeah, until finally the owners of it had to take the last few pieces of it, which were able to be fit in a trash bag, and put it into storage. And meanwhile, the other Orca was put on the lot for Universal Studios and then just taken down one day.
Yeah, Spielberg used to just go out there and sit on it and reminisce. That's where he would have lunch. He'd have lunch on the Orca, and then he went out there one day and it was gone. when he called up and they just said, like, well, it was getting kind of rusty, so we just cut it up for timber and got rid of it.
And he was enraged. I mean, he was threatening things. He was irate. He could have murdered people. I don't know.
He might have actually just got away with it with these Jurassic Park money.
No, those were just the scenes from Schindler's List. They were just re-edited.
I could have killed so many more people at Universal.
Of all the ways for this scene to end, they all start singing.
Because this is a goddamn classic cinema. Everything happens, even in the single scene. Every tone, everything imaginable.
And then the shark comes.
I always love the little part that Brody's the one who keeps singing.
He's still bopping his hands on the table.
Brody is so oblivious for the majority of this movie. It's so endearing. He's the one who's having a really good time.
Oh, now his head touched the water. He's being submerged into the unknown and his fear.
It's just kryptonite. And then meanwhile, a fire just happened. I love the running theme of Brody trying to call for help and something obstructing him.
It's kind of like the old-timey cell phone. We have to find a way to make this not useful. Bust the whole plot wide open if you can just call for help.
I love little moments where Quint kind of cuts his bullshit and actually trusts Hooper into what he's doing. Quint just losing his shit here, pissed off the orca got damaged.
Yeah, I'm sure being drunk doesn't help either.
And there's that.
Here's my question, like, the one thing that's always kind of confused me, even going back as a kid, was that, what was the shark doing? Was it just ramming itself, like, into it on purpose, or was, like, that the implication that it was trying to mess with them, or was it just a really dumb animal that happened to come across a boat and wouldn't move out of the way?
Shooting star, by the way. I think it was, since the other
It worked on Ben Gardner's boat, so maybe the shark was just smart enough to just ram boats until they capsized and it could nibble off people from the neck down.
Probably. I mean, it's acting like a heightened shark, so who knows? That's how, sharks come out from the bottom. Sharks tend to immobilize first, so it's, hitting its target.
Yeah.
Well, if you go by Jaws the Revenge logic, because of the voodoo curse that was placed on the Brody family, that shark is going to do everything it can to both destroy and discredit the good name of Brody. So
you should have seen the flyers it put up around town. I mean, it's...
Would you trust this man with your child?
Like, you see a fin placing it on a pole.
Yeah, Mike came to us just in hysterics the other day because he discovered that in the original script to Jaws the Revenge
and the novelization,
it's revealed that the shark terrorizes the Brody family because of a voodoo curse.
And the Brodies were just never smart enough to move to Oklahoma or something.
See, what I love about that is that it's retroactive. It doesn't just destroy Jaws the Revenge. It retroactively makes the entire Jaws series, including the original, a movie about a voodoo curse.
I loved a little bit there where Quint has to go in and, here, give me the rope for a minute, and tries to take it away from Hooper. And a second ago, it showed them both working on the boat and agreeing on boating terms, like he'd kind of gained some of Quint's trust. But we get this side of Quint where it's all got to be under his control, where, no, not even the rope's right. Give me, I'll do that.
And then he goes through this insanity.
Yeah. You can kind of see this guy's losing a little bit here.
He just has baseball bats. I like how he just has a baseball bat on the orca. Two of them.
That makes sense.
Pirates rob him.
No. If you pull a fish, you normally kill them by clubbing them.
That's true. Well, usually, I mean, there's a difference between a club and a baseball bat, Cody.
Well, a baseball bat does the same job.
I would like to imagine Quint's a little bit more fancy.
Does the rest of his boat look that fancy? For some reason, this guy's carrying an M1 Grand around on his boat. I don't know. I think he's just whatever does the job.
But why does he have multiples? That's what I want to know.
Because you got to kill 2 fish one time.
What does
And
that
you don't
even
have any
mean?
stones.
Now you're gonna do your goddamn job, Hooper. It's about time.
Hoopa! Hoopa! Hoopa!
It's amazing to think that every second you see the you see the shark in Jaws, that's the only footage they had.
Yeah.
Like every second of usable footage went into this movie.
Pretty much,
Oh.
yeah.
Every time you don't see the shark, he's spasming uncontrollably in the water.
Or sinking, or just, falling apart piece by piece.
Or his face is just kind of chewing at nothing, just above water.
I want to see them edit together a movie using just the outtakes of the shark, like it's a comedy. You replace the John Williams score with yakety sax.
It's also goddamn epic.
Oh, like the old-timey adventure film.
It's so sweeping and Errol Flynnish.
It really is. Shots like this just feel like an old, 1,000 Leagues Under the Sea or something.
Feels like something you should have seen in the 40s, not the 70s. Like, it kind of goes back to that timeless quality of it where it itself harkens back to other time periods. It's not just a 70s movie.
Well, people talk a lot about people these days being nostalgia hungry and liking throwbacks to previous generations of filmmaking. The 70s were very rife with this kind of thing, with Jaws, with Star Wars, and Raiders of the Lost Ark being throwbacks to old movie serials. People were really hungry for that type of movie making to come back again.
Oh yeah, once you set the wheels in motion, people don't want to let go of certain genres or certain ways of filmmaking or certain ways of just presenting a film. Like, nostalgia is just kind of one of those universal, not in the company, but just one of those universal concepts where it never leaves you. You always want to see something that reminds you of films of a bygone era, or films that you grew up on, or films that just exist outside of time. Like, you want to see something to recapture that. That's why the, Star Wars trailer that's currently out is so captivating, because, it's like something of a time that was before us.
I just want to take a step back for that little moment where Quint just says, "It's incredible." He's actually in awe of the shark in that moment. And there's actually a complete loss of what to do.
Going back to what Cody said earlier during the beach attack, it's like the shark is God.
Yeah.
The character's feelings about it go beyond any kind of hatred. It's just this force they're in awe of.
Yeah, and it's not like it's not presented as if it's just a normal everyday shark. It's like this shark almost has a supernatural quality to it.
Yeah.
It is nature.
They're not just fighting a shark. For Brody, he's literally fighting his fear.
Yeah.
It is interesting, too, that for Quint and Hooper, there's a certain amount of skepticism going on. When they first angle the shark, Hooper's over there, it's like a stingray or blah, blah, blah. He doesn't believe it's actually a shark that could be smart enough to go under the boat or do any of the things that Quint is saying. And now Quint doesn't quite believe it either. Oh, he can't swim with that many barrels on him. He's going down with 2 barrels on him. Whereas Brody is, kind of the naive innocent, where whenever something happens, he believes it, and he's terrified of it, but he's willing to believe it happens, and he wants to know how they're going to overcome it.
Like that nice little reminder for the audience that those are explosive.
Yeah. Foreshadowing.
Well, there's a lot of foreshadowing to that. There's the photograph he's looking at with the tank in the shark's mouth. There's, Quint saying, that shark could, swallow it whole or something.
Mm-hmm. I always thought there's a part where a machete gets stuck into the side of the boat. I always thought, as a kid, that was going to come into big play at the end, and Quentin was going to use it to do something important. And he really doesn't. He kind of hits the shark with it a few times, and that's it.
Yeah, that's kind of the brilliance of that, though, is that you feel like he's going to go mano a mano with the shark, and at the end of the day, the shark just eats him. Like, it's this big conflict that's built up to that really just kind of goes nowhere because ultimately Quint is in way over his head.
Once again, Ahab doesn't ever get a battle with Moby Dick. He just gets eaten by the damn thing.
Yeah.
I just think it's an interesting inversion of Chekhov's gun. It's put there. You definitely see the close-up shot of the machete, so you think it's going to be important. And then it was like Chekhov's gun. If someone were to pick up the gun in the third act and try and fire it, and it just misfires, whole different scenario. You still use the gun the way it's supposed to be used, but it adds a new wrinkle to the drama, and it kind of upsets expectations.
By the way, that shot of Dreyfus fighting against the waves, that was when Shaw, sprayed the water in his face because he smacked the drink out of his hand.
This movie is, very, with the way the score is played is very operatic.
Very much so.
It practically becomes an opera.
Oh, yeah. Weirdly enough, I can usually see Jaws the stage play being a thing.
With the same shark. By the way, this is one of my favorite little tidbits about the production of this movie. In pre-production, the producers originally wanted to just use a real shark and sent out the call for a shark wrangler. And someone had to sit them down and explain to them, there are no shark care experts. You do not wrangle a great white shark. They don't do tricks.
They end up with dolphins instead.
They just put fins and fake teeth on dolphins.
Probably about they were thinking about halfway through the filming of this.
Yeah, you joke. I'm sure there's some movie where footage of dolphins was used in place of sharks. I feel
Jaws Revenge.
Yeah.
What I want to know is where's the killer dolphin movie, the thing nobody expects?
That was the director's cut of Flipper.
My God, they're communicating.
Oh!
That's what the original Deep Blue Sea should have been.
Their brains are already as big as ours.
LL Cool J battles a dolphin.
Seriously, just imagine this with Charlton Heston as Brody.
The shark would already be dead. He'd just be pleasure fishing.
And Sterling Hayden as Quint.
Oh, Sterling Hayden, Lee Marvin.
God, Lee Marvin would have just jumped into the water and just beat the shit out of the shark.
Okay.
Well, Lee Marvin turned down the role of Quint because he didn't want to fish for a fake movie. He wanted to go fishing for real.
Yeah, he wanted to battle a real shark instead. Fuck that. He does this normally.
I just want you guys to imagine living in a parallel universe where right now we're watching Lee Marvin as Quint, Charlton Heston as Brody, and Jeff Bridges as Hooper in Leviathan Rising.
Directed by Dick Richards.
Who just uses a whale. God, my favorite confusing moment in the history of cinema. Alright, so, when the whale comes out of the water, that's a shark, sir. Same difference. Can we get Spielberg on the phone?
And then cinema magic happened.
I like to think this was actually a pretty solid plan until he just read the boat too much and blew the engines. Like, if he had just taken this at a leisurely pace, it would have worked pretty good. Like the shark would have just been in too shallow water and drowned, like they said. And instead, Quint's just freaking out, so he just rams the boat as fast as possible and blows the engines. Whoops.
It kind of changes the way you view the movie whenever you realize that you can kind of view Quint as an antagonist.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
As him just being a crazy asshole pretty much screws all of them.
I wonder how effective Quint's, kind of breakdown, craziness would have worked without the Indianapolis speech.
I don't think it would have.
No, neither do I. I feel like you really need that.
I mean, he would have been a cartoon character.
That would have been hilarious, though, if without that speech, if there's just that moment where he's going crazy and they realize, oh yeah, we don't really know this guy. He's just a dude who scratched his fingernails on a chalkboard.
And
Maybe we shouldn't have gotten in a vote with this dude.
Nope.
Also, interesting fun fact about Robert Shaw. He was actually facing a tax problem because he's from England, and if he spent more than a certain time in the U.S., he would face a tax liability. So to circumvent that, Shaw was flown to Canada on his days off. So throughout all this madness, he's probably just thinking, I can't wait to get back to Canada.
See all those elks.
He was allowed to leave the goddamn island.
Yeah, and I like to call back here. I'll never put on a life jacket again. Only brings 2 out.
He's like Captain America not using a parachute.
Well, it's so quiet, too. Nothing even has to be said, but you get the 3 looks from these guys not even looking each other in the eyes. Quint bringing out 2 life jackets. That slow pause. It really communicates so effectively how dire their situation is and how they feel like they're screwed.
And Quint, saying, hey, Hooper, can you take over?
Yeah, just that. Here, what the hell are these? Go ahead. Do what you want.
I like how at the end there's no real good guy among the 3 of them. It's just they've all been brought to the brink. They've all been completely turned insane by this shark occasionally showing up and wrecking everything.
Yeah, it's not really a tale of morality or of anyone being the hero. It's just plain old survival.
Yeah. It's still one of the best man versus nature films ever made.
Meanwhile, once again, like Cody was saying with the machete, all this build-up with that, the spear gun and all that, it gets knocked out of his hand the minute he gets in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Or even the shark cage. We got the foreshadowing earlier where Quint basically says, okay, you're going to put that cage in the water, the same water the shark's in. Yeah, that's going to work.
Which falls out ridiculous and then immediately falls back into, so can we do the cage thing?
Yeah, and of course it works just as well as he initially thought.
Yeah. And
it was actually supposed to go even worse because originally in the film, Cooper was going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they didn't was because they actually got live shark footage shot in Australia. And at one point the shark gets tangled up, one of the real sharks gets tangled up in the top of the cage. It's thrashing about and they don't know what to do. So eventually they just kind of have to let it untangle itself and they lose the cage. But when they get back the footage, it looks fantastic, except there's no one in the cage.
Didn't they have a little doll too they tried to use for the same thing? They put a doll of Hooper in the cage and just looked terrible.
Yeah, it looks terrible. Well, they did the... I think is there still a shot of the doll, I feel like?
I don't remember seeing one, but it's possible.
They're not used it.
And then there was the day when the second unit crew put a midget in the cage, and he nearly died because they did not realize that a midget needed the same amount of air as a tall person. I thought he had elf lungs.
If you look at this stuff, the effects, some of this is, Dreyfuss, some of this is a stunt man. And some of this
all of us is a stunt man.
Yeah, that's true. But, the stuff with the small guy, I think there is still some footage of him in there, and you can't really tell. It's blends together pretty well. The only thing is the shark is obviously not the animatronic shark, but...
Oh, yeah. Especially in the close-up shots, what's coming up here, which is my favorite shot of the film, is just Hooper watching as it goes by.
It's kind of creepy.
Yeah, it's primal. It's just within its own territory, and they've entered its territory.
It also doesn't help that stupid harpoon is way too big to ever use in that cage.
By the way, my own private headcanon is the reason Quint is okay with him going down into the cage is because Hooper slept with his wife.
Hooper! Hooper!
Hooper!
Hooper!
Surprise, shark!
Like the shark coming back twice as big. It injected
And
itself with
brown
venom.
for some reason. Yeah, the reason actually that the shark looks different in these scenes is because they were so strenuous with filming that eventually they had to do this sequence in a giant swimming pool. Like essentially a giant dolphin cage, I think, that they got off the studio backlot.
And these shots right here where he's ramming the cage head on doing this. If you look, it's the shark's very brown.
Yeah. Because the shark, the animatronic had been used so much that it had already started to kind of degrade. But you wouldn't know it because, the score, the way that the shots are used.
General color blindness.
Well,
that too.
And also the improvised alternate take of this where they had to have Hooper escape the cage and be alive because they shot that footage and there was no one in the cage.
I love that Hooper lived because of technical difficulties. Because it was too complicated to kill him.
and it's so much better. I mean, it's been said that audiences back then cheered when Hooper pops back up. Yeah, look at this. And if you really pay attention, it doesn't match at all. That cage is right at the edge of the water. The shark's at the edge of the water. The boat's right there. It doesn't match at all, but you don't really.
And not to mention, the live sharks just make a world of difference compared to the mechanical one.
It moves.
It moves and looks naturalistic and
Can flip around and do cool stunts.
And I will forever, at least, defend the animatronic shark whenever it actually is working in the film. Looks pretty good.
it does.
I think it's still an effect that totally works.
It has so much personality to it in its limited movement, I've always felt. The way it just lunges forward is fucking terrifying.
Even shots like that mostly work. It's only when you see the mouth of the real shark does it not match.
Yeah.
Or the rubber teeth bending when it's supposed to be biting down on something.
Yeah.
But you can definitely tell a size difference too, because like we were saying earlier, Bruce the shark is he's this giant monolithic type thing, whereas real sharks are a lot smaller and a lot more lean.
Oh yeah, they say in the movie, it's a 25-foot shark, but great whites don't really get to be 25 feet long.
And this jump onto the boat is,
Pretty
still
supernatural.
effective. Yeah, it's still a
It's
great
a super
moment.
shark. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a mutant.
And then Quint goes tits deep.
Yeah, and this is the part where I always thought the machete was going to come into play.
I'm sorry, it will never not amuse me to see British actor Robert Shaw being eaten alive by a giant rubber shark. Oh!
When you think about it, this is the dark version of the Adam West Batman movie, where he doesn't have the shark repellent.
Robin, no.
Shark repellent is exploding oxygen tanks.
Now he is old chum.
God.
So apparently they had one boat set up rigged so it would sink on purpose, and they had one not rigged for sinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the Orlok was the normal boat.
Yeah, and that one also accidentally sank when they were doing one of these takes.
Yeah, because they had something hooked to the mechanical shark for.
It was for when the shark was pulling the boat when the barrels were attached.
Yeah, they had a pulley attached to it, and it broke off the back of the boat.
Yeah, they essentially had one end of the rope, like the rope went underwater and then came back up and was attached to another boat. The boat was supposed to take off in one direction. And it did, but it pulled half the stern out, and the boat started going down, like, immediately.
And they also had the editing crew, like the sound editing crew, on the same boat with the actors. So they scrambled to get the actors, but at the same time, the editor had his equipment held over his head saying, "Screw the actors, get me off the boat."
And that's when the cameras submerged, and
Oh yeah, they had to figure out if they could save seawater soaked, footage.
yeah, luckily it was done in saline, so they were able to throw it into fresh water, and they had to ship it off to New York to get it done in a bucket of water.
By the way, I like how everything's been, like, brought up to this moment, but it's, like, no big deal is really made of it.
See,
Like,
Well, here's the brilliance of this finale, and what I think is one of the things that makes this ending resonate so much with people is the fact that Brody doesn't become an action hero at any point. He defeats the shark by doing really basic things that anyone in the audience could probably do.
oh yeah, this is his closest to a John McClane moment.
and he gets
it's
a
him.
lucky shark.
Yeah, it's him just hanging on to a sinking sternum.
And he's finally submerging himself in the water. By the time he blows the shark up, he's up to his chin.
And that moment where he's, on that thing, the shark's coming at him, he's, hitting it with the harpoon and shit. That's what I'm talking about with, seafaring mythology. That's right out of, some classic
Yeah, that's
story.
a painting.
Yeah.
That's a painting waiting to happen, actually.
Ooh.
Sure, you can find it on DeviantArt. Oh, by the way, that shot wasn't filmed with Spielberg present.
Yeah, he abandoned the scene so they wouldn't throw him into the water.
And there's a little bit here with the roaring sound effect. And that's actually a dinosaur from an old dinosaur film, but Spielberg could use that effect in Duel when the truck is going off at the end. He wanted to kind of thematically link the two moments and the two films, so that's why there's a similar roar.
Which comes out of the fact that when Spielberg first read the script for Jaws, he thought it was a thematic sequel to Duel because it's essentially the same movie. I mean, it's a movie where a giant truck menaces somebody as opposed to like a giant shark. But he also had this weird thing where he was like really stretching it and saying, there's 4 letters in Duel, there's 4 letters in Jaws, it's perfect.
It all works perfectly.
That's back when Spielberg was really into the number 23.
Fun. That was a nice thematic link. You also wanted to have the old couple from Sugarland Express in the film.
There was going to be a Steven Spielberg cinematic universe at one point. Like, I still want to see, like, a shot of, like, Hooper or Brody in the background of E.T. at some point.
Like they meet a young Tim Robbins. Whatever you do, don't let them get your blood.
Like, at some point in Schindler's List, they get a Robert Shaw lookalike.
Hooper is one of the scientists at Jurassic Park.
Actually, come to think of it, like, a really good Quint in modern day would be Liam Neeson.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
Could you imagine?
Wow.
Shark goes into the water. Oh, shark. He just punches the shark in the face. Where's my family? Takes his hand.
Where's that little Kittner boy? I always felt like there should have been some sort of like gotcha type ending to this. They're in the water, and if this were a modern film, there'd be some sort of hint that it's not over. Like an ominous theme plays, or you see like a baby shark swimming away. Something hint at Jaws too.
Comes out.
But we don't get that. We get real honest closure here, which just seems wrong in some weird way.
Well, no, a little raft comes up with a voodoo shaman on it over the spot where all the blood is from the shark explode, and he starts chanting, and the water starts rumbling. Cut to credits.
He will have his revenge. I just love going back to the simplicity of this movie. There's no epilogue needed. It's just, shark's dead.
This really feels like the movie that never needed a sequel or prequel or spin-off or anything. Like, it's just very self-contained, and it's a great story, and let's just pretend there wasn't Jaws 2 or Jaws 3D or any of the other ones.
Which is the correct way to respond to those sequels.
One last little fact. It's kind of a small thing, but before Jaws was released, the average summer tourist population of Martha's Vineyard was approximately about 5,000 people a year. After it came out, and ever since, the population has skyrocketed to 15,000 people a year. So yeah, the shark is still working.
And luckily, finally, so did this podcast. If you weren't one of the four of us, you didn't experience the hell that was trying to get this thing to happen.
Oh yeah, we had our own
like
making
4
of
false
Jaws.
starts.
The podcast was not working.
No.
Yeah, we had our own voodoo curse to contend with.
We had
It
our
was
own drunk
terrible.
Jaw.
I had to kill 5 chickens and drink their blood just to get the right juju to make this happen. So I hope you appreciated it.
Juju.
I'm sorry. Now I'm cursed again. But
Wow.
Double cursed.
double
What?
cursed. But if you're looking for more information on Jaws, I really recommend you go out and find Carl Gottlieb's The Jaws Log, which is fascinating because he wrote it as they were essentially making the movie. So it's kind
Yeah,
of
it
like
is
the world's
literally
first,
a Jaws log.
Yeah, it's like the world's first behind-the-scenes making-of featurette. Before DVDs and VHS tapes could include special features. The Jaws Log was the closest look you could get to the work being done. It's really fascinating being right there in the middle of it. Or if you have the... Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
But failing that, if you want to check out, if you can't find the book for any reason, there are several documentaries being made or having been made about this that cover the making of Jaws rather fascinatingly and pretty in depth. Like the making of Jaws, for instance, Jaws: The Untold Story, which is actually on YouTube if you look for it, like right now. And of course, there's The Shark is Still Working, which is the documentary about the legacy and impact of Jaws.
And I even recommend the documentary on the Blu-ray for the restoration for the Blu-ray. Is really fascinating, their process on making it look as... I mean, Jaws is one of the best restorations I've ever seen.
Oh,
yeah.
totally.
It's beautiful.
It looks like it was filmed yesterday.
Yeah.
Farewell and adieu. No, we're not going to sing. No more singing. Hoopa.
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 Hoopa. But if you've enjoyed this commentary for God knows what reason, you can find more of us on iTunes. We are on Blogspot. Look for Box Office Pulp. We're around. You can even find us on Facebook. We're hip. We're trendy. We're all over the internet. We also have Mike and MV's podcast, Pulp Nightmare. We have James's podcast, Below the Bible Belt, all worthy of checking out. And I'm sure there's 100 other things we should pimp, so I'll let MV take it for his shows.
We also have graphic novelism, where we have me, James, and Mike discuss comic culture vivisected. And we also have James and Mike's podcast, Hercules versus the Podcast, where Mike tells tales to weary travelers, and James listens.
And I produce. Anyways, thank you very... Hoopa!
Hoopa! Hoopa!
Quit playing with yourself! Anyway, thank you very much for joining us on our very first Bop in a Movie commentary. There's a weird inflection, but I'm going to go with it.
No, it works. It works fine. It works fine.
All right.
I liked it.
Ooh. Yeah. Anyways, thanks for joining us, and that's a wrap.
You get more out of life when you go out to a movie. Please remember to replace the speaker on the post when you leave the theater.
Thank God it's done. It's finally done.
Can I make one joke real quick?
Yes. No, wait. Let me hear it. Then I'll decide.
Fuck you, man. Box Office Pulp tells women he was on the USS Indianapolis.
Box Office Pulp is a bow-legged woman.
Come, swim between my legs. Swim between my legs. Swing between my legs.
God, I wish I had all the Ben Gardner quotes just pulled up right now so I could quote them as Box Office Pulp guy.
Box Office Pulp swam with a bow-legged woman. Box Office Pulp sailed back to Boston. Box Office Pulp didn't want to see her again.
Box Office Pulp had a little drink about an hour ago and wants to go to bed.
Box Office Pulp has city hands. He's been cutting cocaine his whole life.
Box Office Pulp did smile.
Box Office Pulp killed that little kid and spilled him all over the docks.
Box Office Pulp wants to know if you want to go down the docks and cut this fucking shark open.
Box Office Pulp is some kind of half-assed astronaut.
Box Office Pulp wants you to know that this is what happens.
Box Office Pulp is some sort of bad hat, Harry. Box Office Pulp will go down there and chum some of that shit.
Box Office Pulp, as you know, means drunkenness.
Box Office Pulp says, when we get them silly bastards down in that rock pile, it'll be some fun. They'll wish their fathers had never met their mothers. When they start taking their bottoms out and slamming into them rocks, boy, get away from there, you goddamn fool, you. What's the matter with you? You want to swamp us, you crazy son of a bitch? You Box Office Pulp?
Jesus.
He has some issues to work out.
Oh, Box Office Pulp guy, you're really a dick. I don't like you anymore.
Well, I do get murdered by a shark in about 5 scenes. This is Box Office Pulp Guy, and this has been a Pulp Podcast production. Now please, 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 put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger and say goodnight.
And now, on with the show.
This meeting will come to order. The Legion of Pulp is now in session. In a moment, iTunes... Yes, Quizmotron.
I was wondering, Emperor Palpatine, if I could perhaps...
Box Office Pulp thinks we need a few items to pawn on the black market.
Box Office Pulp Guy, you have a podcast dedicated to movie analysis. Pinhead, your pleasure puzzles are deadly. Isaac, you've got corn.
Gone?
What more do you need?
How about a nuclear warhead?
What?
All other supervillains have them. With a nuclear warhead, I shall leave all of the podcasts to tear themselves apart with paranoia.
Box Office Pulp wants a magic lasso to hang himself with.
Can I get a ship in a bottle kit?
I demand more corn.
To make my own ship in a bottle.
Oh, enough of this. The hell do I look like, Santa Claus? We're wasting valuable time. Right now, my Pulp drones are rewriting Apple's code to make our podcast #1 on iTunes.
Excuse me, Emperor.
Quizmotron, what is it?
All Quizmotron wants is pants. A decent pair of pants.
Darth Vader wants pants too.
Order! Order!
Game is not supposed to be this complicated.
Tune in next week at PulpPodcastNetwork.wordpress.com.
I don't even know how I deal with any of you on a daily basis.